We finally got a look at the PlayStation 5, and whether you like the design or not, the intriguing thing about the reveal was Sony confirmed there will be a digital edition of the console, which will not include a disc drive. This is not the first time a company has done something like this, as Microsoft had the all-digital edition of the Xbox One, but that came out many years after the console's original release. With the topic of digital versus physical video games coming back up, I wanted to have a chance to talk about this with everyone, as I still try to buy physical games whenever possible. Do I have games downloaded on my PS3, PS4, Nintendo Switch, PC, and other devices? Absolutely, but there's just something special about opening up that plastic case, putting a disc inside a console, and seeing it boot up. Hey everybody, Juan here, welcome back. For this video, let's talk about the state of physical and digital video game purchases in 2020 and where I personally stand in this topic. I think this is a very generational debate. By that I mean, if you grew up playing video games in the 80s and the 90s and you're used to having that physical copy, your heart, your soul, your mind may be compelled to continue with physical purchases. But if you grew up in a time where the PS3, the 360 already gave you digital options, or you're a PC gamer, then maybe this is a topic that is not up for debate. You're definitely used to going down that route. But before we keep going, if you like what I do, please consider subscribing, click on the bell, go down to the comment section, let me know, where do you stand on this right now? When you look at your video game collection, is it something like this that is tangible, you can physically grab those games, or is it a big, beefy hard drive with many different experiences? I'm dividing this into my concerns as we continue to move forward, but also why I personally love the fact that I continue to buy physical games, and that's going to involve sharing a couple of personal stories with a few set of games. But before we even get to that, I feel like I got to share a story about something very sad that happened this past weekend, so let's actually dim the lights for the sake of suspense. Many of you know that I love the PlayStation 3, and I had around 120, 160 gigabyte model. Even though I was putting in my physical games, because of the storage each game required, my hard drive immediately filled up. So I bought a 1 terabyte FireCuda hard drive. People said it works just fine. I see it boot up, put in the firmware. I downloaded a bunch of games that we had as part of the PlayStation Plus service, and then the next morning, as I browsed the PlayStation Store on my PS3, the PS3 makes a beeping sound. It restarts, and I just see a lovely wave on screen, and nothing else comes up. Then this guy right here goes online, and you write, what happens when the PS3 only displays a wave screen? And the answer I got was a corrupted hard drive. So I lost over 200 gigabytes worth of video games, as well as save data, which fortunately I did have backed up into the PlayStation Cloud, which as long as you're subscribed to that, it does automatically upload your saves, and I even had other saves backed in to a USB drive. But what if I hadn't done that? As I looked up, I realized that with some certain hard drives, sometimes the PS3 just stops working, but I also read other horrible stories of people that had the default hard drive, and that also happened to them. I'm talking about a hard drive that I replaced on my slim PS3, but I have a lot of friends that build a gaming PC. They have a ton of stuff in there, not just video game related, but let's talk about that. Then they wake up one morning, boom, corrupted hard drive. That can happen with your Nintendo Switch, a PS3, PS4, Xbox. I feel like with this conversation about buying digital and physical video games in 2020, there's definitely a gap between, let's say, the PS2 generation and back and the PlayStation 3 and 4, because I can take a look at any of my PS2 games in my collection, or Wii, GameCube, PS1, and 64. I put that in my console, and I don't have to consider patches, downloading game updates. So it's very different because it is literally plug and play or insert disc and play. How many times have we bought a physical game that we get at Target, Walmart? You put it in the console, but it's got to download that day one patch, which begs the question of, what are you really getting when you buy a physical game in 2020? And whether you like them or not, I feel like this is where something like limited run games does become essential, because in their case, it is a limited selection of games that more often than not, they sell out very quickly, people resell them on eBay. But what I love about their games is that, sure, they come out months after the original release. So for context, I bought the physical edition of Streets of Rage 4 for the Nintendo Switch, and I'm not going to get that till many months after. So I've been playing that on Xbox Game Pass, but they pointed out, we want to wait to have the more finalized version of the game, any patches or anything like that. So when you put your cartridge inside the Nintendo Switch, it works just fine. And this doesn't mean that developers cannot continue patching the game or put out any updates afterwards, but they do try to reduce the possibility or probability of you having to download anything like that, which I really do appreciate. When it comes to buying physical games, I focus mostly on the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation and back. Now, I do have boxed PS4 games in my collection, but it's something I don't really focus on too much, and I do have a tiny bit of Xbox One games physically, but for the most part there, I made that transition to Xbox Game Pass. Now, this is a different story with the Nintendo Switch because there, we do have a decent amount of physical games, as my wife and I both have a Switch, and this makes it a lot easier to share games. However, it does become a big pain for anything involving travel. It's just way easier to have the games in that internal storage. And talking about digital storage, I also want to bring up digital versus physical save states. Let's say you have a game for the PS2 and it breaks, or the console itself stops working. As much as it would hurt initially, those can be replaced, but because we had memory cards in that generation, you would not lose your save data unless it became corrupted, you lost the memory card, or it was MatCats branded. And I think this is a fascinating topic because you can have 20 copies of the same game, but they all play the same, but that save data, that is our personal experience with that game, and if we lose that, that is damn painful. As we continue to shift to a digital-only world, we lose control over what we do with our progress. What happens when you have Animal Crossing on Switch, but you decide to buy a Nintendo Switch Lite, or like my wife and myself, maybe you buy a second Switch and you want to carry that entire progress with you? As of this recording, you still can't do that. You have to start an entire new island because Nintendo just can't cope with this and say, hey, just upload that to the cloud. And all of you know that I love the PlayStation 3, but I can't stand that although most games do let you transfer your save to a USB drive, some still don't. So for those games that I can't, unless I use the backup utility or I upload my save to the cloud using Plus, there is a real risk that I can lose my progress. Memory cards were expensive but reliable. With the exception of a few third-party memory cards I owned, all of my original cards for the GameCube and the PS2 still work just fine. While I was working on the agenda for this video, I realized there's both a good and bad side to both physical and digital video games. We can't deny the ultimate convenience that digital video games provide. The fact that I can travel with one Nintendo Switch that has over 20 games. The fact that I have a 1 terabyte hard drive in my computer with over 800 games that maybe I have some installed, maybe I don't, but all I have to do is click a button and the game begins to download. I can't do that with a physical video game that I can't be the only person, and I'll just be real here, that sometimes you forget that you put the wrong disc in the wrong case, and then you spend the next 30 minutes trying to find that game. And even though we can't continue talking about the technology and everything behind it, that's not what inspired me to work on this video. For me, video games, far more than entertainment, it can be defined in one word, and that word for me is connection. And that's why for me, as long as there is a physical possibility of buying a game, I'm always going to try to go with all of that, because the fact that right now you look at my camera, this is not a green screen, that is my physical video game collection. It's only a sample of it, but I love the fact that I can go up in there and I look at the Wii U library, and that takes me back to when I worked on the Wii U game hunting video. And that's actually what I like to do right now. I picked out a couple of different games that have some kind of significance. Now, this is where somebody can go like, Juan, video games are just meant to be played. You're getting way too deep into this topic, but that's who I am, and hopefully everybody respects that. So the first game I had to bring up is a follow-up to a previous video where I talked about PS1 games being playable on PS3, the collection of Activision classics for the Atari 2600. So this is a bad collection of video games for me. I just don't have any fun with it. Something I did not bring up in that video is the reason that I own this is that not too far from where I used to live with my mother, there used to be a KB Toys many years ago. They were clearing out PS1 games. My mom knew I was a gamer, and then she wanted to try to get into the world of video games. So one day she just comes home and she was so excited. She was so happy, but like, hey Juan, I bought a game we can play together. I'm like, oh, that's not, you see, I already have the PS2, which can play better looking games. Like, she didn't understand that, but the reason that I always have this game somewhere in my collection is that it takes me down a memory lane when I have to have that weird discussion with my mother about like, hey, there are different consoles and there are some good video games out there and other questionable compilations. The other game I wanted to bring up is Ico. So this copy of Ico I bought at a Blockbuster new for $19.99. I wish I still had the label. It may have actually been one of the last times I ever went to a Blockbuster. I was already waiting in line, and you know how they have like this stack of just random stuff in there? It was a bunch of used movies, but then I see this cover art, which is infamous. Many people hate it. I think it's okay, but I love the game. I had only rented it up until that point. I see $19.99. This game did start to go up in price. So the fact that I was able to go to a Blockbuster, which that in itself is a weird conversation to have in 2020, but I did this like over 10 years ago. But this always takes me back to that special, maybe last visit or one of the last visits to a Blockbuster. Another game I've talked about in other videos, we got to bring up this copy right here of Mass Effect 2. And this is not a conversation about the game, one of my favorite games of all time. I know there's a debate or not, but I love me this game, okay? But what's special to me is that this copy was sent to me by one of my best friends / damn near brother, Keith Hamilton from the Cast of the Past podcast, which I'm involved with. He sent this over from Canada in a time that I was very economically tight. And he kept talking to me about like, hey, you got to play Mass Effect 2. You got to play Mass Effect 2. And he sent this to me, and it took me like 2 years to finish beating the game. And I just love the experience. But I love that whenever I look at my video game collection, it does remind me that, hey, this came all the way from Canada, and that is pretty awesome. Also awesome is this copy right here of Jade Empire. This is special to me because this is the very first game I ever bought online, in this case being it on eBay. I didn't have a credit card or debit card for many years, and this must have happened in like 2007? I finally got the bug to go online because apparently you didn't just have to go to GameStop to buy games, because that was my tradition, either a GameStop or EB Games. So I went to eBay and I got this for, I believe, $8.99 and free shipping, and it was brand new. I don't know how much this game goes for now, but it's a game like, oh, I just realized BioWare, that totally not intended, but I love playing this game. I actually haven't beaten it, so it's one of those games that I'm like, I should definitely get back in the groove. I brought this up before, and I even still have the label right there in front. Champions Return to Arms for 99 cents. This game goes for over $40 complete in box. And this happened after Hurricane Maria in 2017, I believe it was. There's a video, I don't even know what videos I've worked on in the past. I'm talking about it right now, right? And they had a couple of different just like generic like Madden, NCAA games and the PS2 collection. I almost left, but then I saw this font here, and I have played Champions of Noroth. I'm like, wait a minute. That font is pretty familiar, and if you notice, it says Sony Game 1 Assorted. They actually went online many times and looked up game prices, because some of the other games in that pawn shop went for a couple of dollars, but for whatever reason, they just left it at $1, complete in box, and it's still a great game that I may be talking about in a future video. Now, I mentioned the Wii U game hunting video, so I had to bring up a game like this because I think something that blends the topic of physical video games but also working on a YouTube channel is that whenever I do any kind of video or anything like that, it's like a timestamp. Maybe somebody's gone back and watched my older videos, but so do I. Maybe in 2040, I don't know, 2050 or something like that, I can go back and check out these videos and be like, what did Juan think about that? And in this case, I love the Wii U game hunting video because the entire production process was very fun for me. And if you haven't seen that, you can either check out the video itself or the last video I published where I celebrated the 5K subscribers, and I went in a little bit more detail about the Wii U video. Talking about another game for the Xbox 360, let's bring up X-Men Origins Wolverine Uncaged Edition, a very underrated game that I've wanted to talk about in the channel, but it's never really quite fit into a particular type of video. Far more than just this copy when we open it. Also, okay, let's do some ASMR stuff. Another reason that I love physical video games in 2020. Those sounds, people. Come on now. Whenever I bought a game in any kind of store, I would put the receipt in there because it would be my chance of going back to the past. I actually bought this at Toys R Us in Puerto Rico, And I love the fact that whenever I check out these games, I can look up the receipts and look up the game prices. How much did I pay for this? I actually don't remember right now. I paid 11 bucks for this? I got a good deal, okay. I would not have remembered the price, but the fact that I have the receipt there really does take me back to the past. And then I'm also a bit of a demo disc collector because I love the fact that a demo is this condensed, curated experience. And in this case, this is not something that is really prevalent in 2020. If anything, the switch from physical to digital media killed off some things like jam packs. So I got a bunch of these. I got over 10 for the PS2. I got over 9 for the PS1. It's taking me back to a particular time, like this one takes me back to winter 2001, and I can talk about Final Fantasy X, Jak and Daxter. I could have brought 20 other examples, and maybe if somebody would like me to do a follow-up video of just, hey, grab a couple of games and far more than the games themselves, talk about a story behind the game or something like that, let me know in the comments and I will definitely get to work on that. For me, buying physical video games in 2020 and beyond is about celebrating the past in video games. The fact that I can have this curious experience of, we go back to that game that I got for $1. It's when you go to a place you quite don't know what to expect. Anybody that didn't go to a Blockbuster growing up or a rental place may not understand this, but there used to be a time where you could want to rent a video game or a movie and they would not have it. Nowadays, it's very rare to be like, oh, this digital video game is out of stock. Maybe we have a licensing issue with like the Scott Pilgrim versus the World video game where the license runs out, so they pull it off the store, but those are very specific and unique scenarios. But I think that video games have become so accessible, and in some ways, we may become more disconnected with the video games because if you're playing a digital video game and you're not liking the first 10, 20, 30 minutes, the temptation to press the PS button, press quit, and download another video game is a lot larger. But I feel like the investment, the time and physical investment of getting a video game, putting it inside the console, and just seeing how it works. You may have noticed that when I talk about these different video games, they tend to be in the form of a disc. That's because even though I have a video game collection, I'm a frugal gamer. You may notice in any of my previous pickup videos that I don't buy a used game for $100. I tend to wait for different video game deals. Go back to the Wii U game hunting video, any previous pickups video. And unfortunately, when it comes to talking about games from like the Super Nintendo and back, a lot of those games skyrocket in price. Of course, the same applies for PS1, PS2, PS3 games and beyond. I do have that limitation of I'm willing to have some digital PS1 games. I have PS1 games in a digital-only format in my PS3. Now, going back to the main topic of buying digital and physical video games in 2020 and bringing up the PS5 as an example, the fact that there is going to be a version without a disc drive is scary. Not just because it makes it also a pain, not just to play physical video games, but what about Blu-ray drives and all that, right? I don't like the fact that you're forcing me to use your service. What if any of that ever goes out of service? It may be somewhat unlikely, but we buy licenses. When we buy digital video games, if we read the fine print, we are buying a license to play that game. So with the PS5 is, I don't know what's going to happen. The same way that servers have been shut off on the PS3, maybe that can happen to the actual store on the PS3. When you talk about a company like Nintendo, they've not done the best with their transition, from virtual console to virtual store. Like the Wii, it got shut off. Some of those games, unless you modify the console, still cannot be played anywhere else. So I think that for my peace of mind, and I think the peace of mind for many people, and I would love to know what you think about that, I need options. If you give me the option to buy physical and digital video games going forward, that's going to be good. I know this is a losing battle, so this is not a topic of why people always need to buy physical video games. Now, to conclude the video, I went over to the A Cast of the Past Discord at acastofthepast.com/Discord because right there, I have a small PlayerJuan channel, so you can make sure to join there. Sometimes we talk about different videos. I actually posed this question about, hey, where do you stand on the digital versus physical debate? This first one comes to us from Justin Boannon. I like physical still. I can buy a new game for $30 2 weeks after it comes out from rich kids on Facebook Marketplace. Some people buy a $60 game. They beat it and they put it up online. I've seen many online stores contemplate reselling digital games, which I don't even know. Like, it just gives me a headache. How does that work? Aaron the Mango wrote, physical for sure, cheaper, less storage space, actually get to hold it in my hand. Not quite as convenient as buying it without leaving my room, but I just have to drive up the street, so I'm not worried. Plus, the ability for resale is always a nice option just in case. So we're seeing that kind of like Justin, it is the option. If you don't want to sell your video games, that is awesome. If you need to sell those video games to buy more video games or to buy a box of donuts, that is entirely up to you, but we once again have that option. Sir Meatwad writes, always physical for me, awesome person. He has a really nice Sega Saturn collection, people, so check out the Discord channel for that. And Ace Bunny writes that he likes to buy physical video games. He likes to go to a reseller, sees what different video games they have, and then pick based on the interests that he has currently. He collects games for the PAL region, especially for the Wii U and the Nintendo GameCube. You, my friend, are very, very cool. But if I want a game whose physical release cannot be found anymore, I don't have a problem buying a digital copy, especially if they have a game cut in price. I do have PS1 games installed in my PS3. Would I love to have those physically? Of course. But if the option to buy a physical one is far too expensive, and how many times have I said physical in this video? Even right now, I'm just like, damn, I know that's the topic, so naturally it's gonna happen, but man, time to get physical. Ooh, before this gets worse, once again, people, it's about connections. It's about connecting with video games, connecting as a community. I unfortunately didn't get into this game trading collection scene until like just the very end, and then we got a pandemic. Before that, we had hurricanes in Puerto Rico. But I love visiting all these places, people popping up their trunks, and then seeing which games they had available and trying to get some deals on that. I think that is a thing that sadly, in not even 10 years, I think in 5 years, it's gonna dramatically decrease, and many of us are gonna talk about like, I remember back then when I was able to do that. But luckily we do have many channels on YouTube that do still have that adventure, and maybe that becomes part of video game history. So that right there is going to do it with this topic of buying digital and physical video games in 2020 and beyond. Hopefully I did a pretty good job connecting with this topic, and this is a judgment-free zone, people. If you have made the full transition to digital video games, that is honestly awesome. It's super convenient, right? So let me know, like, if you're a digital gamer, when's the last time you bought yourself a physical game? At the same time, if any of you want to carry the conversation with me, not only can you join the A Cast of the Past Discord at acastofthepast.com/Discord, I also have a Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Mr. Player Juan. Links in the description and all of that stuff. But if you like this video and you like what I do, please remember to subscribe, click on the bell, and up until next time, thank you for watching and supporting, and take care, everybody.